Thanks so much. And yeah, I guess welcome everyone. Good day, good afternoon, or still good morning for some of us on the west-hand side of the country. In this session, we'll run through what we're seeing in the industry at the moment from a DevSecOps perspective, and specifically how DevSecOps is aligning with value stream management capabilities in the BFSI space. A little bit of a broader topic as well. It's impacting the whole industry, but yeah, let's take a look and see what it means to us as professionals in the BFSI space, and what it means to us over the next 12, 18, 24, and potentially even longer duration. I think if we roll the clock back a little bit, it's always good to sort of take a step backwards before we look at the future of where we're going and how we're going to get there. And a long time ago, actually way back in 2011, almost 10 years ago at this point, Mark Anderson of Anderson Hurwitz made a pretty seminal, or created a pretty seminal article in the Wall Street Journal where he talked about software eating the world. I think as IT professionals, we've all experienced the realities of that over the last 10 years. If I go back 10 years, I look at what I was doing from a product perspective, the product lines that we were focusing on, how we were interacting with our customer base, and the type of processes that our customers were using. It's chalk and cheese to the world that we live in today. The reality is that the demands on software from a business perspective have just increased, which has done a lot of different things to us as IT professionals. It's changed the way that we interact with the business. It's changed the way that we interact with our peers. It's changed the dynamic of software as part of a business function. Traditionally, with bricks and mortar world, software was the thing that let the business run. Now it is the business. If we look at financial services in the last 15 years, the transformation has been astonishing. We've gone from difficulty interacting with our end clients, and that could be high net worth wealth clients, that could be the traditional retail banking clients, that could be insurance organizations. Remember the days of those paper processes where we had to create quotes, send them out to people, get a physical wet-in signature, be able to go through the entire stack of paperwork. Hey, remember the days when, as organizations, we even had representatives who'd go out and visit customers? The last 15 years, we have seen huge transitions. The last 12 months, let's take the impact of the pandemic. Let's take the impact of not being able to interact with our end users on a face-to-face basis. Software has truly come along and it has eaten the world. I think that the key around all of this, it's not just the fact that the world has transformed, the fact that the use of software to drive competitive business advantages improved, but the risks associated with software and the risks associated with poorly secured software, the risks associated with slow time delivery of software, and the risks associated with software not delivering customer expectations has been felt by each and every one of us. There's not a single financial services organization that hasn't been impacted by net new organizations coming into their marketplace over the last decade or so. Organizations have shifted their practices. Why? Because we need to be able to deliver competitive advantage as quickly as possible. We need to ensure that what we deliver from a competitive advantage perspective isn't just ticking the boxes and getting us feature or functionality parity with our competitors. We have to be 2, 3, 5 steps ahead at all time to be seen as thought leaders, to be seen as market leaders. And we have to do that whilst all the pressure of being as secure and as high quality as possible retains and remains in our business. The days of being able to ship shoddy software as a software vendor in my world, or as an organization that deals with end consumers in your world, have long gone. The days of systems being unavailable, with very few exceptions, yes, there are some, but the days of systems being available for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days are almost non-existent. And I guarantee you that if a consumer can't access their funds, their policy, their information for more than, let's say, 2 hours, the reality is they're going to start looking elsewhere for someone who they feel will be better for them. So software is eating the world. We know that. And that's driven a huge amount of change over the last decade or so. What has it driven? Well, I guess if we think about it from a DevSecOps perspective, development, security, operations, the alignment processes. You're all grown-ups. I know you all know what the DevSecOps and DevOps terminology is all about. The first 10 years of DevSecOps, and I say 10 years of DevSecOps, yes, we know that the year 2009, we started seeing the first semblance of DevOps, the first true semblance of DevSecOps, probably 2011. And again, a lot of changes in those 11 years. What have we been doing? We've been addressing organizational cultures. We've been making sure that the traditional mindset, the traditional engineering practices that our IT organizations were utilizing have migrated. We're looking at a culture that's based upon agility. We're looking at a customer-centric, customer experience-centric culture within our organization that delivers customer value. There's the first time I've used that word today, value as quickly as possible. We're looking to apply lean practices, lean process improvement. We're taking ideas from other sectors, like the automotive sector as a great example, to simplify our processes. DevSecOps isn't simply that piece in the middle where we do some coding and we throw it over to the testers, or they're embedded in our agile teams and we're embedding our security practices and we ship it out the door. It's about that entire end-to-end flow of our application and our product-centric delivery. First use of the word product-centric delivery. Okay, we're going somewhere here. Lean process improvement, allowing us to simplify what we're doing to remove waste, using the Toyota production system terminology, removing muda from our processes. What does that got to do with SecOps? Well, we'll see that later on. We'll see the impact of waste removal, improved flow, and improved value-based delivery on our security practices. We've seen huge increases in automation. If I were having this conversation with you 10 years ago, we'd have been talking about automation. We'd have been talking about application automation. We may have been talking a little about test automation, application automation, infrastructure automation. 10 years ago, they were the key things. Of course, in the last 10 years, we've moved on dramatically. We've moved on from a notion of automation being a differentiator to automation being a core predefined set of capabilities that we need to include as part of our DevSecOps processes. Automation, infrastructure automation, dynamically provisioning infrastructure, or in a more dynamic world, dynamically provisioning containerization, dynamically provisioning cloud infrastructure to ensure we've got capacity to do what we want. Automation, being able to remove the element of human risk from our processes and from our flows. Okay, cool. Measurement, making sure we're able to measure what we're doing. And sharing, making sure that we share information, making sure that we track and trace everything that's going, making sure that as a community, as an internal community within our organizations and an external community in the broader marketplace, we're sharing the right levels of information. And we're following these comms notions to deliver our DevSecOps practices. That's everything we've been doing for the last 10 years. And of course, some of you will be more mature than others when it comes to processes and practices and DevSecOps adoption. And at this point, let's have a quick poll. Let's just have a quick discussion amongst everyone and your peers who are in the virtual room and figure out what's going on from a polling perspective. So what's the level of maturity and the level of maturity that you would rate your organization for the lowest level of DevSecOps maturity? And again, there's an important reason that I phrased the question this way. Firstly, it was so I couldn't speak and pronounce it. But secondly, what's the lowest level of DevSecOps maturity that you see in your organization? And again, it's kind of interesting. A lot of organizations have the kind of strivers, the parts of the business that have really taken DevSecOps to the next level. They're embedding DevSecOps practices into the entire end-to-end flow. They're running through the entire system. They're making sure that they have everything from code scanning to performance engineering to load testing built into their development and their CI processes. And of course, we have others at the other end where security is still an afterthought. It's an afterthought that gets taken place as a key part of our processes. Yes, we have separate penetration test teams. Yes, we have separate validation teams. Yes, we have separate teams that come in at the last minute after our code work has been completed and we're delivering value already. So yeah, I guess the interesting thing about the poll results everyone's doing fairly well. So we're doing a little bit better than may have been expected, especially sort of 4 to 5 years ago. Minimal process and practices is a small amount of that. I guess if we then take a look at where the bulk of you see yourselves, moderately mature process and practices. You may have concepts and principles around peer review of code. You may have policies and principles around code scanning and code execution. You may have defined code scans that take place, geez, my brain went numb then. You may have processes around static code analysis. You may have processes around dynamic code analysis. Again, for those organizations in a high level of process practice and participation, the good part about that is obviously being able to identify where you can improve. And for the small percentage of you who are at the excellent level, great news. Obviously, every part of DevSecOps is related to the notion of continuous process improvement. So whilst you may be excellent today, continue improving those processes. Okay, so I guess if we go back to the process level of maturity and look at where we've come from, seems like everyone's got a good first step or second step on the ladder to moving on from the DevOps into the DevSecOps practices and looking at process maturity and execution. Where does that lead us from the next 10 years? And again, let's not put my crystal ball too much into use, but we've seen a lot of changes over the last 10 years, and we've seen a lot of changes that we're expecting to see in the next 10 years. One of the big changes is you'll probably see more cats around. Huh? What? Yes, cats. Collaboration, alignment, technology, and streaming. If you build on the comms notion, if you build on DevSecOps and you start heading towards a value stream-based implementation model, we start making use of other terminology, things like collaboration across team, collaboration across organization, collaboration across different product value streams. When we look at alignment of a number of different elements. We look at alignment of technology, alignment of people, process, and culture, obviously, alignment of business and IT. And this is where it gets really kind of interesting. There are still significant gaps between the value that the business perceives from change and the value that we can deliver from a change perspective from an IT organizational side. So alignment is really, really important as we get into the next phases of the next 10 years. And of course, there are underlying technology trends and patterns that we're seeing around this, the adoption of low code, no code application delivery. That could be for prototyping, that could be full end-to-end low code, no code application delivery with embedded security practices as part of that low code, no code execution. Again, what am I talking about there? Building code scanning into your pre-commit hooks from a source management perspective. And in a low code, no code environment, that's building your prototypes in a visual manner and building security scans into those. Now, those low code, no code applications could go all the way through to production and could be your next generation of apps where we're dragging microservices into design palettes, where we're taking this notion of API-oriented architectures and well-defined architectural boundaries from an API perspective and dragging those into design palettes to allow system-to-system interaction and interoperability within our product line deliveries. But it could be the next phase of just simplifying your security processes as part of your ongoing DevSecOps operations. So loads and loads of technology alignment that we can think and talk about. In fact, we can talk about those in some of the breakout sessions in a lot more detail. Technology changes. I mentioned low code, no code as an adoption practice that's coming. I mentioned the notion of API-oriented architectures or AOA, allowing us to define architectures using API boundaries, using RESTful services to be able to collaborate and consolidate application delivery, building security processes into those, building security processes into our software supply chain. Because again, it doesn't matter if we're using low code, no code, or traditional application delivery. A lot of the time, we're still using third-party libraries. We're using third-party components. How do we ensure the provenance of those third-party libraries? How do we make sure our software supply chain that feeds into our DevSecOps operations are working well? And of course, how do we streamline? We've talked a little around lean process improvement and the comms notion. How do we streamline flow? And how do we streamline the flow of our product line delivery across our entire ecosystem? So I guess the next 10 years, in a very quick nutshell, loads more we'll talk about in the sessions, obviously, as we get into the breakout. But I guess that raises the question of why value stream management? Why is this session talking about DevSecOps and value stream management in the same sentence? Well, if you think about it from an industry perspective, there's some information here that some of our friends over at Gartner shared, and that is that by 2023, only 2 years time away, believe or not, being as we're currently actually in the middle of June somehow, 70% of organizations will use value stream management to improve flow in the DevOps pipeline, leading to faster delivery of customer value. So what? Well, we talked earlier about this notion of customer value, making sure we're relevant to customers, making sure we're delivering the value that the customers need from us, and making sure that that idea to delivery notion, that ideation to value delivery at the end, that goes through our entire IT system. It goes through the demand capture. It goes through the demand prioritization. It aligns with our strategic portfolio management objectives and our business objectives. It goes through the IT organization from an engineering perspective. It could be third-party components or third-party systems. It could be commercial off-the-shelf systems like an SAP system and an ERP tool and Oracle applications. It could be a homegrown application system that we need to ensure the flow is as smooth as possible. Remove as much friction from our day jobs. Remove as much friction from the flow of information from ideation to production to deliver that value as quickly as possible. So in 2 years' time, organizations will really be utilizing value stream management to improve their flow. Okay, so what's that going to do with DevSecOps? Well, obviously there's going to be an impact of that. Value stream delivery platforms will also start being used in a lot more detail. Now, a value stream delivery platform isn't necessarily a single tool. Think about the investment that you've made over the last decade or so, implementing your DevSecOps practices or implementing security processes into your traditional waterfall spiral V model, whatever practices you're utilizing. What we really need to start thinking about is that value stream delivery platform notion, how we deliver value through a value stream for a product line and then multiple product lines, and how that's going to be impacted by what's happening. So our investment over the last several years, building out our end-to-end flows, building out our DevOps tool chains, building out our DevSecOps tool chains with fully integrated systems or mostly integrated systems, are then going to be used as the basis for delivering value stream information. So again, by 2023, the use of value stream delivery platforms will grow from 10% to 40%, increasing the level of pressure on the CISOs, the CTOs, the CIOs to deliver information that aligns with business demands. And those business demands could be the business demands that we get from a value-based perspective and view, or it could be a security viewpoint of our value-based delivery, which we'll come to in a little while. And then finally, what else? I guess integrated compliance. So over the next 2 years, 60% of organizations in regulated verticals, congratulations, you qualify perfectly for that, will have integrated continuous compliance automation into their DevOps toolchains. DevSecOps toolchains will be very, very powerful and will deliver this whole notion of integrated continuous compliance. That will help streamline flow delivery. That will help streamline the delivery of the flow of your products through the end-to-end product lifecycle, tool chain, whatever you want to call it, value stream, and it will improve lead time by at least 20%. So compliance, visibility, insight, flow, governance, control, all tightly aligned with our terminology around value streams. At this point, it's a good point for me to stop and pause for a couple of moments and say, a second poll is in the offing. Let's take a look at things from a poll perspective, and let's get a view of where you as organizations, oh, it's popped up on my other screen, so apologies for that. How mature, in this case, are your organization's value stream practices? And this one's really going to sort of set the ground. And again, if I go back 10 years ago, I could have replaced value stream with DevOps. If I went back 15 years ago, I could have replaced value stream with Agile. Basically, how far are you down the route? Oh, interesting. And it's actually a pretty compelling conversation that we seem to be having here. So Everything for a small percentage, in fact, a relatively good percentage, 16% at the moment, or dropping a little, are DevSecOps, and it's popped up onto my other screen again. Apologies for that. Don't you wish for the days when we were all in person? There we go. Our DevSecOps, Agile, and value stream practices are all aligned, and we are optimizing next steps. So 15% of you already down that route. That's pretty impressive. About 50%, give or take, are currently evaluating your value streams. 15% haven't started yet, and about a quarter of you already have value stream transformation plans in place. So it's definitely something, as you can see, that almost 85% of you are currently either participating in or evaluating. I think the reality is that over the next 24 months, there's going to be more and more pressure to implement this whole value stream notion. So I guess, where does it lead us? It leads us into this world of value stream management. We know that we need to drive competitive advantage from a business perspective, and we know that we need to more tightly align business on the left-hand side of our image with IT on the right-hand side of this image. I'm not necessarily convinced that I've ever met business or IT people who look like those, but VSM allows us, and value stream management allows us to track, deliver, and validate the value of change. And that's the key component that everyone seems to forget about. When we're talking about value streams, we're not just talking about flow of information and the speed and the flow of how we can deliver from A to B. We're talking about identifying the value of change from the outset and making sure that we track high value change through that continuous flow. Yes, flow is important. Flow metrics, flow rates are really important. Making sure that we align flow rates with our security practices, making sure that our value of change aligns with our value of risk to make sure that we can deliver those high value customer demands and high value product deliverables. Realistically, VSM is acting as the bridge that allows us to transition from the business to IT in a way that is quantifiable, but is also in full alignment between the two sides. And that's where it gets into a really difficult conversation. What is value for different parts of the organization? Of course, when we talk about what value stream management is, we should also talk about what value stream management isn't. Well, it's not a predefined standard. It's not a predefined process. It isn't a vendor-based technology or platform. It's not a single person in your organization who's driving change. It isn't your project management office or your PMO team trying to change the way of working. And it certainly isn't value stream mapping. There are no standards around VSM at the moment. There are no standards or processes around VSM. It takes the best of what you've built so far. It applies a framework over the top of it to give you some insight, some visibility, some metrics and control to allow you to track flow through different phases and flow through different stages of your delivery cycles, to allow you to track value across all of those, and allow you to identify waste through your processes through value stream mapping. Value stream mapping allows us to identify how things are flowing through the different components of our system. So what else do we have? Well, we know that value stream management is going to allow us to track, to define, to deliver, and validate the value of change, as we just mentioned. We know that we need to track value across all phases of a value stream. Again, what does that really mean? How do we define value? Well, we'll come across that in a second, because value from different perspectives is obviously different. If I'm in the business side, if I'm a customer, if I'm in IT, if I'm in engineering, if I'm in operations, my view of value may be different. And my risk of that value delivery might be different. Again, how we tie all these capabilities is key to really truly driving that VSM transformation. Value stream management should be simplifying the flow of all the phases of our product value stream, and it should be supportive of flow metrics. But again, it's not a tool, it's not a technology. It's taking information from multiple technology sources. It could be taking information from your demand capture system. That could be an ITSM tool. It could be taking information from your development tooling. That could be a GitHub, a GitLab, something from a Micro Focus perspective. It could be any technology around quality management, and quality testing. It could be information around your security processes, something like a Fortify built into your development processes, making sure that you can track the flow times through the different phases and through the different stages. Of course, our value stream map is the visual mechanism to describe that. Think about it, I guess, if you wanted to visualize it in your mind, think about it like a hose pipe. And on your hose pipe, you've got different bricks. Huh? Why would you have bricks on your hose pipe? Well, go with me on this one. You have some Lego bricks in one part, and you've got some big concrete bricks in another part. Obviously, as you've got your hose pipe and you've got your Lego bricks, it's not really going to impact the flow. It's not going to introduce friction to prevent the flow from happening. But of course, where your concrete bricks are, the flow is going to be really constrained. We're going to have a huge amount of friction, and that's going to back up the flow into the previous location. So where our Lego brick was earlier in the process. Think about your different phases of application development, product-centric development, demand capture, requirements elicitation, high-level backlog grooming, engineering, testing, deployment, IT operations. Through all of that, of course, we're talking DevSecOps, so we've embedded security at different phases. But different phases will have different bricks. It could be a house brick, it could be a huge concrete brick, it could be a Lego brick. Each of those different bricks will constrain the flow in different ways. So think of value stream mapping as a really easy way to visualize that in front of you. So we can remove the big concrete bricks and we can simplify and reduce the friction and the flow of information as it goes from ideation to production. In fact, think about it a slightly different way. If someone comes up with an idea, how quickly can it be implemented and delivered to an end user in order to provide value? And then how and what subphases will it go through, and how and what phases will it go through? And how can we improve that flow to reduce friction? How do we take those concrete blocks off our hose pipe to allow information, to allow value to flow as quickly as possible? One of the biggest challenges a lot of organizations and certainly enterprises have at the moment is around value and prioritizing value. There are some easy ways to think about value and tracking value. Value isn't a single bullet point. Value isn't a high or a low. Value takes feeds from a number of different input types. And as we're feeding into the start of our cycle, we need to capture those different input points. We take our customer value, we take our commercial value, we take our market value, we take our efficiency value, we take our future value. Again, thinking about life from an IT perspective, one of the big challenges legacy applications have, and I'm sure there are quite a few of you who aren't just from latest and greatest startups in the financial services sector. You have applications that you've been running for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. How do we transform those applications to deliver future value? How do we ensure that our technical debt that we need to address, how do we ensure that our architecture changes, our infrastructure changes that will provide some form of other value in the long term are addressed? And how do we prioritize that type of change against a customer value change or a commercial value change? At the outset, we need to take all of these value propositions into a single place, apply some kind of weight loading to them, and then provide our single mechanism to represent that value. And it could be something as simple as a numeric scale, or a t-shirt size, or a materialistic value, or an intrinsic value, or it could be a value risk matrix, allowing us to identify the high value, low risk changes that will then drive value through our flow to prioritize work from the outset. Again, it's all around work prioritization linked to value flow, linked to value delivery. Making sure we can represent value in a simplistic way as possible, just in the same way that we can visualize our value stream maps in a simpler way as possible, so that any time we want and any time we need, we can identify change through our entire value stream, our product value stream, and we can identify the value of change as it's going through, because the value of the change shouldn't be manipulated, it shouldn't be adjusted as it goes through. If we define from the outset our perceived value, and again, I'm going to use some weird terms here like perceived value and perceived actual value. If we identify our perceived value from the start of the process, our perceived value tracks through, it doesn't get manipulated by any of the teams along the way. It's a hard set value once we've agreed it from the outset. When we get to the end of our process, and we're again talking financial services, if we're still running warranty periods, remember those days when we used to have a 30-day warranty after a project team completed? More likely now we have product teams who are continuing to work on the processes, and they're pulling in issues and defects for a period after the application has gone live. But those warranty periods, that long-running project or program or even product delivery teams who are still sitting there, they need to be able to track and capture the perceived actual value once you've done your delivery. So we're starting at the beginning with our perceived value. We're getting to the end. We get to our perceived actual value. That could be a physical weight. That could be something that we know that we had to track. Website example being the great one. We need to reduce page load times by 50 milliseconds to drive 50% increase revenue. Wow, imagine that. Simplistic example, I know, but if we say that from the outset and we deliver at the end, we know our perceived value and our actual value align. If they don't, our perceived from the beginning and our perceived actual from the end, where we don't have something intrinsic or actually statically defined that we can work against, then we need to look at what's our value gap. And for those of us who've been to London, when you get on the train, it tells you mind the value gap. No, okay, mind the gap, but close enough. Mind the value gap. How do we make sure we mind that value gap between our perceived value and our actualized value? As we go through that entire process, as we go through that entire end-to-end value stream, and of course, as we're going through our DevSecOps processes as part of that entire end-to-end value stream. Whew, okay, so how do we do that? How do we build on DevSecOps? Well, we can start looking at things like flow metrics. Again, once we're capturing value and we're capturing idealized value or perceived actual value versus perceived value, we then start tracking the flow of our product line delivery, the flow of our product value stream. Flow metrics allow us to try to align this continuous business collaboration. It allows us to say from an engineering perspective, an IT perspective, that, hey, Mr. Business User, I know exactly what it is when you're talking about what we want to deliver from a value, and I can give you insight into how long it's going to take us to get there. I know how long it takes for this type of change at this type of value to flow through our end-to-end system, and I know the risks that are involved, and I know the areas that we need to focus on. Of course, underneath all of this flow metrics, we're going to be pulling up information from numerous different systems. It could be from our demand capture systems. It could be, like I said, from our source code management systems, our build systems. It could be from our deployment tooling. It could be from our IT operations tooling, our CMDB with information getting populated into that, our change rate metrics that we're capturing, time to resolution, flow times, cycle times, all of those flow metric analytics. Well, in fact, a bunch of different flow metrics, pretty much 6 of them that start off with some of our flow metrics that we need to generate. I know that Dora has 4 flow metrics, but hey, that's Dora. We like them. We like those guys. But let's think about 6 metrics like lead time, cycle time, throughput, work in progress, flow efficiency, work profiling. Once we've done all of that, we get to a point where we can start seeing flow metrics in action, and we can start seeing how that data is generating value across our entire toolchain. Because again, if we think about life from the inception, the ideation, we're going to start delivering value once we get into execution, the value creation phase, where our IT organization is delivering the value, much in the same way that in the manufacturing space, we have inputs into our space. In Toyota production system, we have everything that's feeding into the TPS, then we have the value generation happening, and then we have our outputs at the end. In our world, we're defining from the outset, then we're getting into value creation phase. That's where the rubber hits the road. That's where the engineering teams are delivering the value, the competitive differentiation, and the business value that IT is providing to the business, and then connecting it to the systems running in production and taking those feedback loops and running it all the way through the system. So how does that kind of visualize? And again, this is a really simplified visualization of product value stream flow. Yes, I know there's huge amounts that aren't called out on here. Underpinning it all, you have a bunch of different capabilities, like our security frameworks, for example, our CISO processes that attach to the back end of the systems, our security frameworks that tie into our value stream delivery platform capabilities, our metrics, our reports, our visualization that happen. Underpinning automation all the way, of course, software supply chain governance to make sure the components that are going into our value creation phases are suitable for use. Financial governance, making sure we're tying our financial objectives into our strategic portfolio management objectives, making sure that when we're coming up with these ideas at the beginning, over there on the left-hand side, that those ideas that are coming through the process are tracked and traced through our strategic portfolio. They align with our financial governance rules. They're meeting the objectives of the business. And again, trying to align that business and IT, because IT picks up the demand and the requirements and the change and the version, making sure that the change, the version, the build, the deployment, the test, and the release management processes are all working seamlessly and providing value stream delivery information that can then roll up through our metrics and our flow metrics into our entire value stream management platform. Of course, ties together at the back end through our APM technologies, where we might be tracking actual value rather than actual perceived value, tying into our ITSM tools and technologies to close the loop through our help desk and start the process again as change comes back into the system. Value stream flow, value stream management, value stream DevSecOps. Very, very quick tour, 20 slides or less, as we run through how we flow information. I guess at this point, I've been talking to you guys for 40 minutes, so I must apologize. I've gone way, way longer than I possibly ever intended, but we've still got about 10 minutes or so for a number of questions. And I did see a number of questions pop in, because every time you guys send a question in, my screen loses focus and I can't change slides. So I think there's 33 questions in the list at the moment.
There's quite a few questions coming in. So let's jump right in here. And I'll leave this little diagram up for a bit just so people can consume that in the meantime. But thank you very much, Julian. Very, very, very insightful. And yes, this has created a lot of questions from the audience. So I'm just going to start tackling these one by one. First one that comes in, how do you handle large orgs that have multiple DevSecOps teams as they deliver different services internally? Do you have suggestions to streamline the services?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where it gets kind of really interesting. This is where we start looking at value streams from not just a product perspective. Obviously, everything we've talked about so far has been more product line centric, but taking that view to the next step up and looking at a framework that sits over the top of each of your individual product value streams. Again, if you look at something like the Toyota production system, we've been taking a lot from the manufacturing space over the last few years. If you take the notion of the TPS and then you go up a level and you say, okay, well, they manage product lines individually, their product value streams individually, but they feed into a master system of data lake with all of their information around multiple product streams, multiple product lines. That then allows us to uplift all of that information to a point where we're going beyond individual DevOps teams and we're taking a look at it from the organizational perspective. That then allows us to start looking at, okay, well, if we're looking across multiple product lines, multiple product value streams, how do we normalize that information? Because different DevOps teams will potentially be using different models and capturing different levels of data. So normalization is really a key to that, lifting that information up to the top level, getting that data lake underneath everything that we can track and trace, we can start building AI against, for example, but really looking at ways we can start normalizing that data as it feeds into the different DevOps teams, the different DevOps functions that are working, and then lifting that data up to a top level platform that sits across the top of everything. So I think in the, let me move the Q&A off my screen. I'm not sure it's popped up. There we go, I'll move over here. So think of those development teams more in terms of working down here at the value stream delivery platform layer, working through their DevOps cycle, and think of this product value stream management platform sitting above all of that and then taking feeds from multiple areas. So strategic portfolio management feeding into a VSMP, ITSM, or maybe even multiple ITSM tools feeding into the VSMP. And by uplifting it a level above the DevOps teams into that value stream management platform, you get that visibility and insight across all of the different teams. You can compare like with like or like with unlike as you normalize data and you start looking at flow across each of those teams.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm glad we kept that diagram up there for that question. Next question, so absolutely, value stream management is a new strategic and operational approach required to achieve a truly lean enterprise. However, without security control automation within CI/CD pipeline, this would be a huge challenge for many organizations. Many organizations have failed implementing value stream management early on. How would you rationalize the approach?
Oh, that's a fantastic question, and I think it really ties into the whole notion of needing to have this extended viewpoint of security within our DevOps team. So down here at this value stream delivery platform layer, going back to that DevOps team component. The notion of shifting security left and embedding security practices as part of every single part of a DevOps or a value stream delivery platform conversation is really, really key. We're reaching a point of maturity in organizations now where security isn't the afterthought that it was 5 years ago. It's embedded into CI practices. We're getting to the point where we're able to hook security prior to that with pre-check and pre-pull and pre-commit hooks from the source code perspective, scanning source code before it goes in. That ties into the whole notion of artifact governance, making sure that the artifacts that we have are from known sources for a start, making sure that the artifacts that we have are part of a functional process and validation process. So let's take a quick walk down through some different terminology here. Our artifact vaults, again, a lot of you guys will be aware of the artifactories and the Mavens and the Nexus repositories, and making sure those artifact vaults have associated automated processes that validate and continuously poll and validate to make sure we don't have any third-party vulnerabilities, no CVEs identified, no no unwarranted or unwanted licenses included in those third-party libraries, bringing that part of the software supply chain into our artifact management component. So when our developers, even before they commit any code to a repository, when they try to do a local build, we can identify if there are any either insecure or non-secure artifacts or non-approved artifacts trying to be included in our process, shifting that whole process as far left as we possibly can, all the way back to like I said, the pre-commit hook. So when the application is built, or when the code is built, or when the third-party application configuration changes have been made, we immediately know before the CI process executes that there's a problem, there's an issue, it needs to be flagged. And then post-commit, once we've got those artifacts into our artifact repository from the build perspective, we built our new artifacts, we know they were secure when we built them, but of course time progresses and new vulnerabilities are identified, making sure that we can track those vulnerabilities as they go through this entire DevOps value chain. And that'll be me clicking my mouse by mistake. Making sure that as we go down through this process, we can track and trace where those artifacts have been used, because everything that's secure today might not be secure tomorrow. Being able to identify that as a part of an automated process where our CVEs are identified from third-party tools or outside the systems, being able to then track and flow that as we've got, this is our artifact in our secured vault, this is our artifact as it's progressed through dev, integration, UAT, pre-production, pilot, staging, production environments, where those artifacts at those versions are, and if we expose vulnerabilities, how we can track those vulnerabilities through that pipeline is really key. So that's kind of where I would go. Again, it's critical that SEC is a key constituent component, not just of the CI process, but the pre-CI process, and then extends all the way down through the rest of the value stream delivery platform, and that DevSecOps implementation is done right, because otherwise, you're absolutely right, we will struggle with that value flow, and we'll struggle with those flow metrics.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And another question, there's still plenty to get through. Do you have suggestions on how to lead a discussion with identity access management teams wherein API access is required internally and API access hasn't been made a priority?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I called out earlier on was this whole notion of API-oriented architectures and being able to both visualize and interact with APIs from an architectural perspective. Enterprise architecture at the moment doesn't always focus on API connectivity. Enterprise architecture tends to think in slightly bigger boxes. The IAM organization and trying to align the IAM organization is so much easier once you have your AOA properly defined. And once you have reuse patterns and once you have API use patterns across multiple applications, both able to be visualized and able to be shared with different organization users, because it is a challenge that we face in so many different parts of the business as we transition to low code, no code, and we try to use drag drop processes and visualization models for application creation. We hit the same problem. IAM doesn't want to hand over information around how APIs should be connecting, the security protocols that are in place. Of course, there are standardization mechanisms that you can use, and there's technology that will support some of those standardization models. So you have things like advanced authentication, which will allow you to pre-share either credentials or allow you to share in non-production environments a pseudo stub of virtualized CPE or keys. And then when you get to the production environment, that access information is obviously dynamically switched through a use of parameterization and properties. So the organization doesn't have to expose production keys, they expose non-production keys. But yeah, definitely looking at application API-oriented architectures, and then looking at sharing information from your organizational unit to the IAM teams is a good way to start getting them on board, because a lot of the time they're not exposed to the challenges that we face as we're trying to integrate applications together. And of course, the velocity that we're going at means any breakdown in our process flow becomes waste, and we need to optimize that waste out. And I'm not saying AI, wow, it sounded like I was saying IAM is waste there, but I wasn't saying that. Making sure that those teams are fully engaged as part of the process.
Fantastic. We've got time for maybe 2 more questions if we can squeeze them in. First one, how do you enable a business to start value stream mapping to provide continued improvement and helping business deliver high quality products?
That's a really good one as well. So when I've done this with organizations that I've worked with, it sounds really strange, but you start as coarsely as possible. A lot of the time when you're looking at value stream mapping, and when people are looking at the complexity of their entire end-to-end ecosystem, the sheer number of stages that occur and the difference between different organizational units or different teams and the stages that they go through causes people to take a step back and say, this can never be done. The reason I say start as coarsely as possible and drill down from there, if you think of trying to define a value stream flow, what you're really trying to capture at the very, very high level is the big buckets that you're going through. Again, this is the start as coarsely as possible. And for me, starting as coarsely as possible could be as simple as taking 4 buckets: plan, define, deliver, run. And you take those 4 buckets and you map the different parts of your organizations into those 4 buckets to start off with. And again, there's tool-based approaches, there's visual-based approaches that you can do with something as simple as PowerPoint. Taking those 4 big buckets as a starting point, they're your top level phases, and starting to track entry time, exit time through those different phases will start to help you identify flow through, plan, define, deliver, run. Then you go into the next level of granularity, which is the subphases. And those subphases are more related to the functions, the logical functions that you're going to be providing in each of those bigger phase boxes. It's a shame I don't have a slide that I normally use around this on screen, but let's say we're in the plan phase. We could be in the plan phase, and a subphase would be something like epic creation. It could be requirements elicitation if you still do that level of granularity. It could be something as simple as demand capture. And the demand capture and then the epic creation or the requirements elicitation will each also have then that input and output time, start and end time. So we're going from that high level granularity of 4 boxes to a lower level granularity by the time you've got through those 4 boxes, times by maybe 3 or 4 subphases in each of those boxes. Obviously, you're up to sort of 12 different phases that you're going through. Depending upon the organization, you then go into the next level. So then you start looking at it for the next tier phase down. That could be a subphase, or it could be a stage. The stage is more equivalent to the different names of the states that you're, let's say, if you're using Jira, your Jira tickets are going through. If you're looking at things from a planning perspective, the portfolio management and the approval processes that you're going through. So by building from the top down, from granular to more granular, to very granular, it allows you to approach it in a structured manner that allows you to build up the big picture. Hey, this is our first value flow, and then our detailed value flow, and then ultimately, this is the way we're really working across multiple teams. Because like I said, if you start at the bottom, it gets really complicated, really difficult, and people tend to give up.
Amazing stuff. Thank you very much for that answer. And thank you everyone for the questions. I said we had time for 2, but we don't, because we need to go to the next session. But thankfully for everyone in the audience, especially if you didn't have your questions answered, we're going to have a roundtable discussion on this very subject next, where we can open this up to your opinions, bring everyone's perspective to the table, and allow for a little bit more collaboration on this very important topic. First and foremost, let me ask the audience to join me in a virtual round of applause for Julian. That was a really, really great session. And what a fantastic audience we have. My God, the questions coming in, the comments coming in, collaboration in the early stages of the session was amazing as well. So this is really, really, really good to see, folks. absolutely loving it.